I still remember the silence of the prison corridor at midnight. The air heavy with the knowledge of what men are capable of. In my years as a jail security officer, I came face to face with many convicted killers. I've seen the emptiness in their eyes, heard the chilling laughter in the dark when they thought no one was listening. Those experiences still haunt my dreams, and they set the stage for the story I'm about to tell. Tonight, I will be your storyteller, carrying the weight of those memories to guide you through one of the most terrifying true crime tales in South Korean history. This is the story of Jeong Nam-gyu, a man whose name became synonymous with nightmares. Jeong Nam-gyu was not a legendary, massive, terrifying figure. Rather, he was small and easily missed in a crowd. However, beneath that modest exterior was a darkness so profound that it rocked the whole country. He would go on to be known as the pleasure killer, because he killed for the pure, deranged thrill of it, rather than out of anger, revenge, or greed. As someone who has gazed into the eyes of heartless killers, I urge you to prepare yourself. This is not a story for the weak of heart. It's an exploration of pure evil, told in the hopes that by comprehending this darkness, it won't ever reappear. Every monster was once a child. Born in 1969, Jeong Nam-gyu's world was filled with suffering from the moment he was born. He was physically abused by his own father, and even worse, sexually assaulted by a male neighbor while growing up in a home that provided little warmth. The seeds of darkness were sown in a young boy's soul in these traumatic events. As he subjected to those abuses, one can only imagine the fear and confusion that were twisted inside of him. Those initial injuries appeared to solidify into something cold and cruel. Jeong grew up in hard conditions and became a loner, living on the edges of society. Inside, he carried deep pain and anger. To others, he may have seemed quiet and ordinary, but inside him, a storm was rising. Psychologists later said that Jeong felt completely left out and unwanted, as if he had no place in the world. Instead of asking for help, he gave himself over to the darkness. The line between victim and villain began to blur. The abused child grew into an abuser, taking out his pain on people who could not defend themselves. He did it calmly and intentionally, in a way that went far beyond normal human understanding. Jeong Nam-gyu didn't stumble into murder blindly. As warped as it sounds, he prepared for it. He saw murder as his calling, his life's work. While most of us set goals to build careers or families, Joel set a goal to become the perfect predator. He exercised obsessively, lifting weights and training his body so he could overpower his victims with ease. He also fed his twisted mind. He was inspired by the infamous, the unsolved serial murders of the Hwaseong killer in the late 80s fascinated him. He reportedly admired how that killer instilled fear in an entire nation. Jeong even idolized fictional murderers like Dr. Hannibal Lecter from novels and films, blurring the line between reality and fantasy. All these influences marinated in his mind. By the time he reached his mid-30s, that festering darkness was ready to erupt into violence. The boy, who had once been helpless, now craved to make others feel helpless and afraid. He was poised to turn his private nightmares into a very public horror. It began on a cold winter night, January 14th, 2004, a date seared into the memory of all who later learned what happened. On that night, Jeong Nam-gyu claimed his first victims. Two young boys, just 12 and 13 years old, crossed paths with a predator in the darkness. Perhaps they were walking home together under the streetlights, talking about school or games, and not knowing the danger stalking them. Jeong abducted them, subjected them to unspeakable abuse, and then strangled them. The innocent souls of those children were lost forever in Jeong's first act of violence. I have seen tough men break down describing crimes against children. There's different weight, an unbearable sorrow when the victims are so young. Imagining what those boys went through, my heart twists even now. Jeong later coldly explained that he targeted the boys because he himself had been abused as a child, as if inflicting the same pain on another could somehow settle the score for his own suffering. It was a twisted cycle of cruelty. The victim had become the victimizer. The double murder was only the beginning. In the months that followed, fear took root in the suburbs of Seoul and Gyeonggi province. Jeong struck again and again in 2004, each time with calculated brutality. A young woman walking home late at night in the city's Shinggil district was found stabbed to death in February. Another woman in nearby Guro, and then another in Gwanak. Victims seemed to vanish or turn up dead with alarming frequency. At first, these cases were scattered, hard to connect. Some were stabbed viciously with a knife, others strangled with bare hands. The randomness was deliberate. Jeong changed his methods and weapons often, doing everything he could to confuse the authorities. One month, he might prowl the alleys with a knife looking for lone pedestrians. Another month, he'd break into an apartment to hammer someone in their own home. By choosing different methods, he made it nearly impossible for investigators to see the pattern. To them, it looked like a series of unrelated horrors. To him, it was a deadly game of cat and mouse. Imagine the paranoia that began to spread. In those years, people in southern Seoul lived on edge. Who was safe when a killer chose victims so randomly? Men, women, old and young, it didn't seem to matter. College students walking home alone at night were gripped by that urge to glance over their shoulder. Parents kept their children close, remembering the boys who never came home. Even families behind locked doors felt that walls might not keep the danger out. Jeong attacked wherever opportunity arose, in darkened stairwells, lonely parks, even inside victims' own homes. In one horrifying incident in early 2006, he invaded a household and murdered an entire family. A 17-year-old girl, her 21-year-old sibling, and their 12-year-old little brother were all found strangled on the same night. The cruelty is staggering. He extinguished 3 lives in just one ruthless sweep. Jeong Nam-gyu didn't always get away cleanly though. There were survivors, people who encountered the killer and lived to tell the tale. A 71-year-old grandmother and her teenage granddaughter were brutally beaten in their home in 2005, but miraculously survived, though badly injured. Others managed to fight him off or escape by a stroke of luck. These survivors became key puzzle pieces, providing clues, a glimpse of the attacker's face here, a method there, but even then, the police struggled to connect the dots. Each new crime scene brought dread that the killer was growing bolder, and he was. By 2006, Jeong was on a frenzied roll. In late March of that year, he attacked another household. 2 adults in their 20s were found dead, and a 13-year-old girl in the same home was left wounded but alive. The bloodbath was escalating, the intervals between murders growing shorter. the city of Seoul was gripped by the realization that a serial killer, another one, was in their midst. At this point, detectives had begun to piece together what they were dealing with. South Korea had only recently reeled from the capture of another notorious murderer, Jeong in 2004. The idea that yet another serial killer was stalking the streets so soon was almost unthinkable, and yet here he was. The media hadn't given Jeong a name yet. They didn't know who was behind the crimes. But whispers of a shadow killer or second Jeong floated around. Police formed a special unit and ramped up patrols in the affected districts. Fear and frustration mounted with each new victim. Who could be doing this? The killer left scattered evidence, no clear pattern, nothing that cried out a single identity. It was as if death itself prowled the city, invisible and merciless. For over 2 years, Jeong Nam-gyu had eluded capture, but in April 2006, his luck finally ran out. It happened during what would be his final attack, a confrontation that would at last unmask the predator. Jeong broke into a home in the dead of night, intent on adding 2 more victims to his list. Inside that house, a man and his adult son awoke to a living nightmare, a stranger with murder in his eyes. But unlike Jeong's previous targets, these victims fought back with desperate fury. Jeong had never intended a fair fight. He thrived on helpless prey, and now he found himself locked in a battle for his own life. Neighbors, alerted by the noise, called the police. By the time officers arrived, the scene was chaotic. The victims, bloodied and injured, still wrestling on the ground. Jeong Nam-gyu was caught in the act. The long, terrifying hunt was over. The predator had been trapped by his own prey. At the police station, the true scale of Jeong's evil began to surface. Investigators soon realized they had much more than a burglar on their hands. This was the monster responsible for the murder spree that had kept the entire nation trembling. Under interrogation, Jeong sat in the harsh light of the interview room, a slight, unremarkable 37-year-old man in handcuffs, and he did something that made even veteran detectives' blood run cold. He started talking, with a chilling calm, showing no remorse and no fear. Jeong Nam-gyu began to confess. He admitted to killing 2 boys back in 2004, describing crimes with a disturbingly even tone. And then he confessed to more and more, one murder after another. He recounted the lives he had taken as if some shopping list. Some of the officers present had to steady themselves. They were in the presence of a self-made monster who saw these acts as nothing extraordinary. I've heard experienced prison guards describe similar moments when a prisoner so easily describes atrocities that make your stomach turn. It takes everything in you to keep your composure in front of such inhumanity. The South Korean police, realizing the enormity of this case, brought in a criminal profiler, one of the country's best, to help dig into Jeong's psyche and ensure no victim went uncounted. Through a series of intensive interviews, this expert got out the full truth. Piece by piece, Jeong confessed to 13 murders committed between January 2004 and April 2006. 13 innocent lives brutally cut short, and numerous other attempted murders and assaults. As the profiler later recalled, it was the case I will never forget for my entire life. Sitting across the table from Jeong, he felt he was gazing into an abyss. He later said that when he looked into Jeong Nam-gyu's eyes, he saw pure evil staring back. Those words stick with me. Pure evil. Term not to be used lightly. But hearing it from a man who personally interviewed Jeong, it crystallizes just how frightening this individual was. Even more chilling were the insights into Jeong's motive, or lack of it. He easily described murder as his passion, his addiction. Investigators asked him why he did it, and his answer was simply that it gave him pleasure. At one point, with a faint smirk, Jeong remarked something that has since become infamous. It's easy to quit smoking, but not killing. To him, killing was harder to give up than a nicotine habit. When I first heard that quote, I remembered a conversation I once had with an inmate, a murderer, who told me that after his first kill, he couldn't sleep because he was too excited reliving it. He said it was like a high he needed again. Hearing Jeong's words, I realized that he was the embodiment of that murderous addiction. This was no ordinary criminal with a rational motive. Jeong Nam-gyu was a man who killed because it made him feel alive. In the sphere of crime, that is a rare and terrifying breed. With Jeong Nam-gyu in custody, a collective sigh of relief passed over South Korea. The reign of terror has ended. People who had been afraid to walk alone at night finally felt safe again. The media, now knowing the face and the name of the killer, splashed his image across every channel and every newspaper. The public was horrified to learn that this soft-spoken, slight man had been behind so much bloodshed. Many had assumed the killer would look like a hulking madman. Instead, they saw a average-looking 30-something-year-old man in prison row. It was a disturbing reminder. Monsters don't always look like monsters. They can live among us, hidden in plain sight. Jeong was swiftly put on trial. The evidence was overwhelming. In 2007, the court convicted him of multiple murders and sentenced him to death. It was the harshest sentence available and one that South Korean courts reserve for the very worst criminals. And yet, even this felt like inadequate justice to the public. Many believed no punishment could truly make up for the lives he stole or the fear he had sown. The South Korea hadn't executed a prisoner since 1997, but the existence of a death sentence for Jeong Nam-gyu was a symbolic statement. This was society's ultimate condemnation of his crimes. Jeong Nam-gyu reportedly showed no remorse in prison, no signs of guilt or sorrow. Perhaps in his mind his only regret was that he could no longer continue his career. It's a horrifying thought, but one supported by his own words and actions. Then came November 21st, 2009. It started as an ordinary morning in Seoul Detention Center, where Jeong was held. A guard on the early morning round approached Jeong's cell only to stumble upon a grim scene. Jeong Nam-gyu was hanging, plastic trash bags looped around his neck. Sometime in pre-dawn hours, the killer decided to end his own life. The guard shouted for help and they cut him down, rushing him to the hospital. Jeong clung to life a few hours in the hospital, but by the next morning, November 22nd, 2009, he was pronounced dead. The serial killer who had terrorized a nation was gone by his own hand. In the end, Jeong Nam-gyu never faced execution or lived out a long life behind bars. He wrote his own final chapter, Some of the victims' families felt robbed of the chance to see justice fully served. He would never stand in chains and hear an execution order, never truly pay for each life he took. Others felt relieved that he would never hurt anyone ever again, and that perhaps his tormented soul was banished from this world. I also wondered what final thoughts went through Jeong's mind as he tightened that rope. Did he feel remorse in the end? Fear? Or was it just the final act of control by a psychopath who refused to let society decide his fate? We will never know. Beyond the personal tragedies, the case of Jeong Nam-gyu left a lasting impact on South Korean society and law enforcement. His killing spree, following so soon after other high-profile serial murders, forced the country to take a hard look at how it handles such crimes. Police investigations grew more sophisticated. The era of criminal profiling and behavioral analysis truly took hold in Korea because of cases like Jeong's. In fact, the profiler who interviewed Jeong went on to help establish modern profiling units using insights from Jeong's case to train officers on detecting and understanding serial offenders. There was also a broader social reflection. How does a prosperous society produce monsters like this? Were there warning signs that were missed? Debates sparked about mental health support, about the effects of childhood abuse, even about censorship of violent media, since Jeong had been inspired by books and movies about killers. Perhaps most immediately there was a surge in public vigilance. People became more cautious, looking out for their neighbors, reporting suspicious individuals. The legacy of Jeong's crimes is a scar on the collective memory, a reminder that evil can emerge anywhere and that we must remain watchful. I recount this story with a heavy heart and a sober mind. As someone who has walked the rows of cells housing murderers, I know that evil is not abstract. It has a face, a name, a voice. In Jeong Nam-gyu's case, it was the face of a seemingly ordinary man who held extraordinary darkness inside him. Telling his story is like walking through a nightmare, yet it's important that we do so. We owe it to the victims, to those two young boys who never grew up, to the women and men whose lives were cut short, to the families forever broken, to remember what happened. We owe it to ourselves to learn what we can from it. What sticks with me most is the chilling realism of Jeong's case. This isn't a ghost story or a horror movie plot, it's real. I wish I could tell you that it's purely the stuff of imagination, but I sat across from men like Jeong in the prison. I've heard the killer describe how easy it was to take a life, the same way Jeong did. When you hear that, something in you changes. You realize that while we go about our daily lives, working, loving, dreaming, there are those out there living in a separate reality, one where human life means nothing more than a momentary thrill. It's a hard truth to swallow, but it is truth nonetheless. South Korea, like any society, continues to grapple with that truth. The story of Jeong Nam-gyu remains one of the most haunting chapters in its modern history. It's a story that law students, criminologists, and prison officers like I was still talk about in low, cautious tones. The name Jeong Nam-gyu serves as a warning of how deeply a person can descend into depravity and how badly the system can be tested by such an individual. But it also stands as proof that eventually, even the cleverest killer can be brought to justice. That good people, the police, the witnesses, the survivors who fought back, can put an end to the nightmare. As I conclude this tale, I find myself gazing at the flicker of a lamp in my room, the hour well past midnight. I imagine it's the same darkness the Jeong once prowled, but tonight, thankfully, it's peaceful. The monsters, for now, are locked away or gone. In telling you this story, I have tried to strike a balance between the emotional weight of the tragedy and the chilling facts of the case. It's not easy to relive these events, but it's necessary. We must remember the darkness to appreciate the light. So tonight, hold your loved ones a little closer and double check that lock, not out of paranoia, but out of wisdom learned. The story of Jeong Nam-gyu shows us that evil is real, but so is justice, and so is the resilience of a society that refused to be broken by fear. This has been the chilling tale of Jeong Nam-gyu, told by someone who has walked among both the innocent and the damned. May the victims rest in peace, and may we never forget the lessons learned from a man who chose to become a monster. If you want more stories like this, subscribe and join me as we uncover more shadows of the human soul. Thank you for listening and stay safe.